I want everyone to understand, if those numbers stand, if half of those people don't show up, he's losing Michigan. And so let's talk about this a little bit. We are seeing, not only are we seeing, I mentioned earlier that, her job is to convince everybody else that that was a slip, that is not their policy position in terms of their relationship to Palestinians in Gaza. And it's not working. It just simply isn't working. Young progressive Democrats are splitting from the Party on Israel, which is, we'll read this and then we'll talk about some of the repercussions. The progressive Jewish group, If Not Now, went to Capitol Hill last week to talk to lawmakers and hold a rally, while the group sang a call in response of ceasefire now and not in our name. Next to the reflecting pool, Matan Arab Neiman, the group's spokesman, explained why they were there. Quote, we've only seen, what is it, 17 members of Congress so far call for a ceasefire, and I'm so grateful for their moral courage, he said. But the rest of Congress needs to step up and end this bloodshed. As of today, 18 House members have signed onto a resolution calling for a ceasefire in the war between Israel and Hamas. That's a small minority, but it represents a real ongoing divide among Democrats. In March, Gallup found that for the first time in more than 2 decades of tracking, Democrats sympathize with Palestinians more than Israelis. About half of Democrats said their sympathies are more with Palestinians, compared to about 4 in 10 who said their sympathies are more with Israelis. That divide is decades in the making. The U.S. supported Israel from its founding, with President Harry Truman, the first world leader, to recognize the new state of Israel in 1948. U.S. involvement grew in the 1960s and 70s. In the Cold War, the Soviet Union allied itself with some Arab nations, even going so far as to arm them. In the 1970s, you see the emergence of a real special relationship there, where the United States gives Israel quite generous support and to a large extent gives it unconditionally. Explains Stephen Walt, professor of international relations at Harvard's Kennedy School. Since then, American leaders of both parties have maintained that special relationship. Proponents have argued it's strategically important to have a strong democratic ally in the Middle East. They would be right if it was a strong democratic ally, but it's just an ethno-state led by, at least under Netanyahu, led by a fascist. So not, I wouldn't call that the most useful in terms of, I wouldn't call that, the most advantageous strategic, maneuver by us. Walt co-authored the controversial book, The Israel Lobby and the U.S. Foreign Policy, which was criticized for its views on U.S.-Israel ties, also points to domestic influence from pro-Israel groups as a factor in the alliance. Most notable among those groups is the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, or AIPAC, and Walt says that the influence is asymmetrical. Quote, there's hardly any countervailing forces on the other side. There are some, sort of pro-Palestinian, pro-Arab, pro-Muslim groups, but they're much less numerous and politically influential. Despite the tight U.S.-Israel alliance, there have still been reasons over the years why some Democrats have questioned that bond. Let's take a look. For one thing, the behavior of Israel leaders can push away American voters, like the friction between Israel's conservative Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and then President Barack Obama. Netanyahu clearly appeared to be aligning very much against the Obama administration and with the Republican Party. This angered lots of Democrats. In addition, Israel has had right-leaning prime ministers for much of the last 30 years. The country's rightward shift, Walt said, has likely made some Democrats less willing to support the country. There has also been a pronounced generational split. Polling shows young Americans are more critical of Israel than their elders. That isn't an entirely new phenomenon. During the Vietnam War, young leftists who already opposed that war started to question U.S. involvement in Middle East politics. Quote, there are youngsters on campus who are protesting against the war, and then some of them start to look at Israel's role in the Middle East and say, are we seeing kind of the same dynamic here about U.S. foreign policy? Mark Mellman is found in a Democratic majority for Israel, which promoted pro-Israel Democrats. He says time has helped drive the age divide. First of all, we're farther away from the Holocaust. The Holocaust is not a lived experience for most people anymore. That split goes hand in hand, right? And okay, you can kind of always tell these sorts of guys, these sorts of what's the word, opportunistic, and certainly like more often than not right wing leaders in Israel by the fact that they constantly want to bring up the Holocaust as if that's relevant to the current situation. We all understand, especially here on the left, we all understand and have probably a greater understanding of the Holocaust than those on the right, but we have no interest in Israel using the Holocaust, a horrible moment in history, as a bludgeon and as a badge to act in any possible way they'd like with their neighbors. Plain and simple, preemptive strikes, preemptive attacks, preemptive killing is just not something that we're tolerable of. Some Democrats have been hurt. Let's see. That split goes hand in hand with an ideological divide, especially since the Hamas attack last month. That divide has grown bitter. Some Democrats have been hurt and enraged by some progressive groups who immediately blamed Israel. That view by no means represents progressives as a whole, but when it comes to why an ideological split exists, Melman is blunt. He thinks the left needs to be better educated. I would argue that the far left does not accurately or adequately understand the issues at stake in the Israel-Palestinian conflict. Yes. Oh, wait, isn't this the asshole founder, right? This Melman guy? I don't know why we're even talking to this motherfucker. Yeah. Oh, yeah, it's just, okay. What did it say? I would argue, let's see. In particular, he said many critics of Israel misunderstand who the victims and oppressors are. We would argue that the rights of people in Gaza have been abrogated by Hamas much more than by Israel. Well, I would have to agree with that if Hamas was bombing and at the hands of the deaths of thousands of Gazans. So it's a bit of one of those when we stack up the two death counts here. Most of the time it's Israeli missiles. It's not Hamas missiles. For his part, let's see, in particular he said, argue right. For his part, Syracuse history professor Khalil argues that many young progressives do understand the situation. They say Israel's longstanding treatment of Palestinians, for example, heavy restrictions on Gaza residents' movements, as a form of systemic oppression. He adds that it's a lens through which progressives already see many domestic issues. Young Americans are able to put the situation of the Palestinians into a broader perspective and see these parallels, whether it is other settler colonial examples or when they look at the treatment of indigenous people, when they look at treatment of minorities. Some progressives, because let's be clear, the value for most progressives, the value is in the oppressor, like at the or in the oppressed, I suppose. It's in the recognition of who has power in the dynamic. And we all understand rather clearly that Israel in this conflict and in their relationship to Gaza and the Palestinian people have had the power for decades, longer than I have been alive. So when you come to me and say well, look, like Hamas this and Hamas that, I'm like, yeah, Hamas is a terror organization, a jihadist terror organization. Nobody here supports that. But if that's where we're going to stop analyzing the situation and not analyze the living conditions of the people who join those jihadist movements, then we're not doing any service to anyone. The people on the ground who are hurt and the people who are on the ground. Oh, yeah, the people who are on the ground who are hurt. Sorry, I don't know why I said and. Anyway, what do we got? What the hell is this? What the fuck is this? Quality order management. What the fuck? Oh, if you're ever, let's see, if you're ever curious as to why a lot of some of the messages that usually get stopped by filtering and moderating, it's chats like this. What the fuck is this? Sorry bothering you. I want to offer a promotion. Yeah, I'm okay. Anybody who wants to give me a promotion, just send me money. I'll send you my Venmo account. Anyway, where are we? There it is. Some progressives have long drawn those parallels, particularly in some communities of color. For example, in the Black Lives Matter years-long support for, for example, in Black Lives Matter's years-long support for pro-Palestinian causes. Israel's attacks on Gaza, which have killed thousands, have therefore only intensified some progressives' senses of injustice regarding the conflict. To Walt at Harvard, it's easy to overstate the number of Democratic politicians who are critical of Israel. What? Wait. It's easy to overstate the number of. Yes, there are some prominent voices in the Democratic Party in the so-called progressive movement. AOC, obviously Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, but there's still quite a small minority within the party. Oh yeah, super tiny, like super duper duper tiny. Let's see. Still, the Democratic divide isn't going away. At the rally in D.C., Arad Neiman said he thinks that the party's drift on this issue will continue. I think so many young people have seen decades of U.S. and Israeli policy of just maintaining the system of apartheid fail, and it's so clear. I'm Israeli American. It hasn't kept my family safer. President Biden has continued to walk a fine line. No, he hasn't. On the conflict, saying Israel has a right to defend itself. This isn't defense, but also pushing for more aid for Palestinians, or, maybe a ceasefire would be nice. And for Israel to protect civilians. They're simply not. We already heard that. We already heard them say that they're not really looking or interested in preserving civilian lives. It's not a thing that we really need to, it's not something we really need to think too hard about. But, let's see. And so let's talk about this really quickly. What kind of consequences does this have? Okay. So I think if nothing else, what we are going to see is let's see. Can I find, let's see. Let's see. Where are these till? Okay. So we have right here, this is the 538 average of polls. So if we go to the attack on the 7th, disapproval is up 14. Looks like it's actually closed the gap slightly, although we still kind of see this disapproval numbers. Granted, we might not actually be seeing them until later, but my point with that being, something that we need to look out for, and the danger of this, I think. Let's see, Biden. Can I get what do we got? Trump +6, Trump +2. In 2 of these, the other ones are all Biden +1s or a +3, and one that's like a +7. But something that needs to continue to happen are these marches, are rallies, are protests. Mainly because this is going to, I think, in the long run, this is going to hurt Biden's chances. We've seen a few instances. I think it's Arab American. It was like an Arab American group. Let's see if I can find it really quickly. Oh yeah, here we go. Sure. How long is this? 2 minutes.
In the streets of Dearborn, Michigan, overwhelming support for President Joe Biden has turned to anger.
When we voted for Joe Biden, when I worked on his campaign, I thought he would be somebody that could lead with humanity and compassion. Clearly, I was wrong, so I definitely feel betrayed.
More than half of Dearborn's residents are of Arab descent, and 70% of them...
Oh, by the way, this is in Michigan, a swing state.
...voted for Biden in 2020. But since Biden embraced Benjamin Netanyahu and Israel's war in Gaza, that support has largely evaporated.
We worked very hard to elect him in 2020, and now we don't feel seen, we don't feel heard, and we don't feel safe in our communities because of the rhetoric coming from the Biden administration.
It's a popular topic of conversation in establishments like Haraz Coffee House.
God damn it, I bet that fucking coffee's good.
Of the Middle East,
I mean, I don't really like
Africa.
Coffee, so.
The loss of Arab American and Muslim American support could prove costly for Biden. Donald Trump won in the state of Michigan by 10,000 votes in 2016, and in 2020, Biden won by 155,000. There are 200,000 registered Muslim voters in the state of Michigan.
If this stands, I want everyone to understand. If those numbers stand, if half of those people don't show up because in 1 year they still feel like no position has changed in the Biden administration, understand he's losing Michigan. And there's not a lot of there is not a lot of ground to kind of just give up the nonsense like this. So let's look at this electorally for a minute. Let's get away from the war side of it, because we understand that. But in terms of electoralism, it is absurd for us to sit here, just under a month since the attack on the 7th, and the Biden administration is doing its best to alienate not just Muslim voters, but also to alienate progressive voters, a voter base, and young voters, a voter base that they are going to need in a year's time to win a presidential reelection. And, the case that's going to happen, this is what's going to happen. These are the two outcomes, I think, or at least the two scenarios in my head. One, the Biden administration does not budge, or at the very least, their change of policy is small, slow, and ineffectual. With that, the best argument people like me are going to be making for reelecting Joe Biden is you have 5%. You have a 5% chance to influence the administration through your protests, through your rallies, through your ceasefire calls, through your marches. You have like maybe a 5% chance of pushing the administration. Or you have a 0% chance at pushing a Trump administration. Plain and simple, those aren't really strong. That's not really that strong of an argument. And the harder that argument is going to be, the longer the Biden administration shows no ability to move on this issue, the harder it's going to be in 1 year's time to convince people that they have any ability to influence this administration. Because that's the argument that's going to be made. And again, if nobody can point to movement on this issue, to movement by the administration, it's going to be all for naught. And then what? And this is the sort of Damocles above all of it. People don't feel heard by Biden. People feel upset, betrayed. All of these things. They don't vote for Biden. They punish his administration's position on this, rightfully so. They then damn the people they are standing up and trying to fight for to an even worse fate. This is people who hold this position, the ceasefire position, people who want to see an end to the death in Gaza, an end to the tensions in Israel, all of it. It is a lose-lose for us. The longer this goes on, the longer the Biden administration drags their fucking heels, the worse this will get. Electorally for us, and in reality, in the future for them over there. And this is all very much like Trump in a lot of his court cases. This is all an unforced error. This is all a choice that the Biden administration is making to nuke their own ability to win re-election. The thing that they tell, like at the end of all YouTube videos where they tell you to like click on one of these like things to watch more videos. Yeah, I've been meaning to film one of those. So that's what I was doing. I was just setting it up to film one.